The ancient writings from the Old Testament book of Exodus tell us that God directed Moses to build a tabernacle so he could dwell among his people. Following specific instructions given by God, the tabernacle was completed at the center of the encampment. A cloud hovered over the tabernacle by day and a pillar of fire by night, showing God's presence. In addition to the construction details, God also gave commandments concerning the regular sacrifices and offerings to be made at the tabernacle. Among these commandments, the Lord set aside a special day each year when the high priest would make a sacrifice to atone for or cover the sins of the nation of Israel. This solemn day was called the Day of Atonement. The Day of Atonement, called in Hebrew Yom HaKippur, was considered to be the most holy day of the Hebrew calendar. It was the day when atonement was made for the sins of the priests, the people, and the cleansing of the tabernacle. Preparations began early in the day. Everything needed to be ready and at hand, since this special ceremony was carried out by the high priest alone. On all other days, the high priest wore his full ceremonial dress made up of 8 separate pieces of clothing, which distinguished him from other priests. But on the Day of Atonement, he removed the decorative clothing and wore only the 4 white linen garments of a priest. This expression of humility further illustrated the fact that this day was different. When the high priest was ready to officiate, everyone, including the other priests, left the tabernacle and courtyard area. The people realized that for the whole nation of Israel to receive the benefits of the ceremony, it had to be performed through the ministry of their highest anointed individual, and him alone. Although the people were not permitted to enter the tabernacle courtyard, they gathered at the gate to catch a glimpse of what was happening. There was a certain anticipation in the air on this Day of Atonement. It marked a new beginning for each person, as past sins were forgiven through the shedding of the blood of the sacrifice. The Day of Atonement ceremony was carried out with care and precision. Each aspect was performed with the utmost reverence, according to God's specific instructions. The washing of both the hands and feet, illustrating spiritual cleansing, was commanded by God. This physical and spiritual cleansing was repeated several times throughout the day. Once cleansed, the high priest went to the gate to receive the animals required for the sacrifices: a bullock, 2 goats, and a ram. These animals were special, carefully selected for their healthy and unblemished condition. While today it may seem a cruel concept to use a fine animal for a sacrifice, this is clearly what God prescribed and commanded. Blood sacrifices illustrated a key principle which God wanted his people to understand. He surely created these particular animals for this important purpose, and they glorified and pleased him in offering their lives for the life of the nation of Israel. 2 nearly identical sacrifice rituals were performed one after the other. The first was a bullock to make atonement for the sins of the high priest and the priesthood. The second was one of the goats to make atonement for the sins of the whole nation of Israel. Blood from the animal was caught in a copper bowl and set aside to be used for sprinkling and pouring in the ceremony. After the blood was collected, re-cleansing at the laver was required. The high priest would then take hot coals from the brazen altar and place them on the incense altar in the holy place. The sweet aroma from the burning incense, representing the prayers of the nation of Israel, filled the air and rose upward as the high priest offered prayers to God. The high priest would have recited several selections from a collection of 18 ancient prayers, such as, "Hear our voice, O Lord, our God, and spare us, and show mercy upon us, and accept in mercy and in grace our prayer. For thou art a God who hearest prayer and supplication. Let us not return empty, O our King, from before thy face. For thou, Lord, in mercy, hearest the prayers of thy people Israel. Blessed by the Lord who heareth prayer." Hearing the high priest praying, the people would join their hearts in prayer, asking God to forgive their sins and accept the atonement sacrifice. "Forgive us, our Father, for we have sinned. Pardon us, our King, for we have transgressed. For thou pardonest and forgivest. Blessed by the gracious Lord who multiplieth forgiveness." After cleansing again at the laver, the most critical part of the ceremony began. Utilizing the blood caught in the copper bowl, the high priest entered the most holy place, the Holy of Holies. The Holy of Holies was the chamber of the tabernacle where the Shekinah glory of God dwelled. Entering this area during the ceremony was a fearsome responsibility. Inside the Holy of Holies, the high priest sprinkled the blood upward once on the mercy seat and then 7 times before the Ark of the Covenant. He then left the Holy of Holies by backing out, never turning around and never looking directly at the Ark or the mercy seat. Since the high priest had removed his garments with the bells, the people waited anxiously outside, not knowing whether the sacrifice was accepted or even if the high priest was still alive. When he finally emerged into the outer court, the people would have undoubtedly rejoiced to see him. After recleansing at the laver, the high priest entered the holy place and sprinkled the blood upward once onto the curtain or veil that separated the chambers, and then 7 times on the ground before it. The high priest would then exit the holy place and re-cleanse at the laver. After combining the blood of the bullock and goat, he sprinkled the blood on the horns of... The next stage of the ceremony was designed to illustrate how God viewed the sins of the nation now that the sacrifice had been accepted. By placing his hands on the head of the living goat, the high priest would impute or transfer the sins of the nation to the goat. The goat, bearing the sin and the judgment of the nation, was then led out of the camp into the wilderness, and it was customary for the people to jeer at the goat as it was led away. In fact, the term scapegoat comes from this ancient ritual.